So we have seen how to play around with your static member. So one thing is, if one object changes the state of data of static variable, it's getting changed for all your objects. And second, we have already seen this, right? When does a static data member come into existence? It comes into existence before any object is created. So it's before any object is created, right? And that's why we can call it using your class name even before any object is created. So it doesn't hold good for any other data member in the class. All the data members can be accessed only by their object name followed by data name. But in the case of your static data member, even if an object is not there, they exist and you can access them using your class name, right? Okay. So this is a figure depicting that. So in case you do not have any object, right, for this class over here, so this static data still exists, right, and you can access it using your class name, right? So if this is your class name, you can refer to this static data from your main, right, using your class name, but you can do that only if it is public. So we have also seen this. So if this static data is private, then I try to use a class name followed by s static data, it will show an error. If it is public, I can do that. Okay. Now the next question is, what if the static data is private and we want to access it before creating any object? So don't you think there is some problem there? So what it says that I have a class. In this class, I have a private static data. So let's say my gold, in my example, it is private, right? Okay. So if and then I can have some functions inside this, right? So I had a function called print money there inside your Bob. So inside this function, Bob can go on and print the value of gold since it is a public function. So with this public function, I can see the value of this private static member, which is gold, right? But my question is, and see from where you can call this function, this is a normal function. So an object should be calling this function. So if I have an object in existence, then object can call this function and this function can then print the value of gold, right? But what I'm saying is, I want to access the value of this gold, right, before any other object is created. So if I do not have any object, I cannot call any function. I can't see the value of gold. And then, as we have discussed, inside my main also, I cannot use a scope resolution and then see the value of gold because gold is private. So how do I go about this? So whenever, so this is one rule of thumb. Whenever you are accessing to any static data in your class, right? Although we have seen that we can access it using objects. So object1.data, object2.data. It is not a nice way to do it. The reason for this is it can create confusion in the mind of the client, right? So if every place you see in your program, so you are just skimming through the program and you say that it's written bob.gold, alice.gold and all this stuff, it conveys a sense that gold is actually a automatic variable and Alice is having her own value of gold, Bob is having his own value of gold, while in actual it's not so. So you should be sort of avoiding writing it like that, and you should always be trying to access this gold with the help of your class only. But then we have seen that when we are doing it using class, gold should be public. Now I don't want to keep this gold public to the class, it should be private to the class. In that case, how do I access its value from main? So to do that, we have one more thing in our program, and that is your static function, right? Static functions are similar to your static data. So what is a static function? So like for your static data, you do not need objects, right, to access the value of your static data. Similarly, to access your static functions, again you do not need any object, you can do it with your class name. So with your class name you can access static function, and with your class name you can access static data, right? And then let's see here what's happening. So functions can access normal data and functions can access your static data also. So that we have seen, right? although we should avoid such things, right? So we should not have our normal functions accessing static data and stuff like that. Okay, what about which data static function can access? So can a static function access static data? Very much, right? Because why we are making a static function? So that we can change your static data. Can static function access your simple data? Does it make any sense? So you have a static function. Static function means that it is corresponding to a class, and even a class can invoke this. So if I have a class called family member, this family member can go on and invoke your static function, right? And it can do this much before any object is created. Then if it is doing this before any object is created, then should it be able to change this data? That does not make any sense, right? Because this data comes into existence only after your object is created. So this data corresponds to your object. So how can static function go on and change the value of this data? That shouldn't be allowed, because it might be the case while static function is trying to do so, no such data exists because I do not have any object. So we'll soon try to do it with a piece of code, right? We'll do this. So this is one thing. You can always use dot operator to access public static members, be it data or functions. So pub access, okay, I'm sorry, it's not the dot operator, it's a scope resolution operator here, right? So I can always do family member scope resolution static data, family member scope resolution static function, right? And another way to call these functions is to object dot static data. Similarly, you can do a object dot static function as well. So you can call static data and static functions both from objects also, but it's not recommended because it conveys a different sense. So this is always the right way to do that. Let's write a piece of code and then try to understand it. So let's create a static function also.